So welcome back to our Let's Chat Solar. It's our live YouTube channel on YouTube and the social media platforms, and we're here to answer questions regarding the solar revolution that's taking place. I'm Gareth. I'm part of the team here at Microcare. We've recently celebrated our 33rd birthday of manufacturing local products in South Africa. So we felt the need, with all the questions we get every day, to document some of this and share some of it with you as well. I just want to say thank you to all of you who've sent in comments. I think this is our third video, and we've had lots of people asking questions. We've had people asking if they could be guests on the show. Absolutely. I mean, we'll keep going with it. At this stage, we're just really opening it up and answering questions. So keep it coming. We'll do our best to answer as much as possible. Some of you had questions about your batteries, which we will address in the coming weeks as well. And some of those are specific to battery manufacturers, which we can certainly help you sort out as we go. So lots of requests to be guests. Can I also come onto the show? Absolutely. We'll connect with some of you. Some of you have shared your own YouTube channels where you talk about solar, and we'll try and connect those as we go. So keep it coming, and we'll keep on going through some of the technical things. As I say, we're going to try and keep it fairly simple at first. We really want to try and equip people about understanding solar. And why is this so important? Because right now there's an energy crisis happening in our country. We've come from a decade of where electricity was easily available and cheap, and now all of a sudden over the last couple of years that's changing quite rapidly. You know, we're very wary of leaving lights on and electricity on, wasting. So we've become a bit more energy conscious. We're starting to understand a little bit more about electricity and solar. So this really is about educating ourselves with this change in energy usage and how to integrate solar. So I want to talk today about three little aspects, important parts about solar. And one's the inverter. Secondly, talk about the batteries. And thirdly, talk about the solar panels. Because these days, a lot of people are getting quotes, and all of this is sort of integrated and mingled, and there's no real clarity about what is the size, what's the purpose of these things. A lot of these imported products are all built in one, so you don't really have many options as to changing the size or really getting to understand what is required. So I want to talk about those things very briefly. There's so many inverters and batteries and panels on the market. How can they all be the same? Why are they so different in pricing? You've got a 5 kilowatt inverter that could be under 10,000 Rand. It could be 15, it could be 20, it could be 30,000 Rand. How can they all be doing the same thing? Well, I think we know that they're not doing the same thing, and that's why it's quite important for us to talk about it. So let's look at the three aspects as a foundation for some of our conversation going forward. So firstly, let's talk about the inverter. How do I know what size inverter I need? And there's lots of sizes on the market, and we must also clarify that you get kVA inverters and kilowatt inverters. And what's the difference? Well, it used to be straightforward, but these days with so many products on the market, it's created a lot of confusion. But essentially what we do at Microcare is we make kilowatt inverters. The power factor is 1:1. It's true power. So if you've got a 5 kilowatt inverter, you can get 5 kilowatts of power coming through there, where a 5 kVA inverter could be anything from 2 to 3 to 4. Well, there's no real formula anymore. It's pretty much anything is going, unfortunately. So we sell an inverter that's true power, 1:1. That's the power factor. Now, that inverter needs to cover the peak amount of power going through the system. So if you choose a 5 kilowatt inverter, and at your home or business, let's say home, the geyser comes on, a kettle comes on, and a hairdryer comes on, and all of those added together come on at the same time, and they go over 5 kilowatts, then we're going to have a problem with the size of the inverter. The inverter is going to trip. Now, you might actually see on our YouTube channel that we recently posted a video last week of a Microcare inverter, a 3 kilowatt inverter, switching on a lawnmower that's 3 kilowatts. And then we took an imported product that's 3.5 kilowatts rated, and we tried to see what the difference was. And you'll see in the video that the Microcare inverter actually can take the power, where the 3.5 kilowatt imported product couldn't. It switched off. So how can the large inverter, 3.5 kilowatt, switch off when the 3 kilowatt one stays on? How can they be the same? Well, they're not. That's the key thing. The Microcare inverter has a transformer in it. It's got a big muscle. And particularly in South Africa, with our energy spiking all over the place, you want that muscle, that shock absorber to really handle the power, where your imported products often don't have that large transformer. That's very small inside there. So the inverter really, they're not all the same. Is it a transformer-based inverter? Is it not transformer-based? And you need to understand what the implications are of having a transformer and a non-transformer-based inverter. But to size the inverter correctly, I need to be able to handle the peak of the power. So most households in South Africa, I would say probably 8 kilowatt is the right one. If you've chosen a 5 kilowatt, you're not going to put your geyser on it. You're not going to put air conditioning on it, underfloor heating. You're not going to put kettles on it. You're going to try and reduce that load to essentials, things like TVs and lights and, fridges. Just low load, something that's consistent. Where if you want to put a little bit more power on, you need a bigger inverter, 8 kilowatts, 10 kilowatts. Microkey manufactures a 15 kilowatt inverter with 2 big muscle transformers in them. That's ideal for like a large home or a business with lots of servers and computers. So when you size the inverter, you really need to know what is that peak load. If you don't know what it is and you put an inverter that can't match that, you're often going to see that inverter tripping. And that's what's often happening now. Or a lot of manufacturers will try and reduce the amount that can be connected to the inverter to avoid that kind of tripping. So to size the inverter correctly, you've got to cover the peak load that your business or your home would want. Right, second, let's talk about the batteries. Now, the batteries are like your water tank. That's how I got through studying electricity at school. I remembered electricity like water. So think of your battery like your water tank. And something's got to fill that battery. If you don't have solar panels, it could be Eskom, could be even a generator possibly, something that could fill that water tank. And then at nighttime or when there's load shedding, you're going to pull out of that water tank. And that pulling out of the water tank is using that energy. And once that energy is used, there's a point where it stops. There's no more water left. So you need to fill again. If you've got solar, you're going to wait for the sun to come up the next day. Otherwise, if you've just connected to Eskom and it's a UPS, then that battery needs to be able to switch over. The inverter will start to charge it. Now, that really determines the size of the battery. If you want to get through the night and not use Eskom, you need a bigger battery. If you want to get through load shedding, you're a business and you maybe have 2 or 4 hours of load shedding at your offices regularly, then you must work out how much power I need, how big the water tank must be for that 2 or 4 hours. So that's the sizing of the battery. Is it related to the inverter? Well, not really in terms of the power, except these days with lithium-ion batteries, you need to make sure that there's enough battery storage that can fit the size of the inverter. What do I mean? If you've got an 8 kilowatt inverter and you've only got 5 kilowatts of battery, and the inverter tries to take instantaneously 8 kilowatts, the battery's going to say, hang on, I can't give you that amount of power. And I see a lot of people these days will take a big inverter, like an 8 kVA or kilowatt, and only a 5 kilowatt battery. That's a recipe for disaster. You really got to make sure that you've got a battery that's capable of handling the power that the inverter would connect. So the battery's there to be able to supply you the backup power from load shedding or during the night or whenever you don't have power or you don't have sun. But also make sure that that battery is big enough so that if the inverter wants all that power, there's enough for it to be supplied. So that's the inverter, that's the battery. Let's talk about the solar panels for a moment. There's a lot of science that goes into this, but essentially, when the sun is out, we call it sun hours. These are the average amount of hours in the day that we get sunshine. Down here along the coast, we average about 5.5 hours of sunshine. I know in winter, it can be less, but in summer it's a lot more. So it's an average, and this comes from the SA Weather Service. It's not something that we've made up. Certainly inland, places like Gauteng, you can get 6 and 7 hours. I've got a great client in Namibia. He's working on 7, 8 hours. It's different around the world. That's the amount of time on average I'm expecting my solar panels to be sitting in the sunshine to be able to make power. And I like that idea. That's when I open up the taps of filling up my batteries. So when the sun is out, my batteries are being filled up with that power. And then I start to use some of that power during the day. And then, of course, at nighttime, when there's no sunshine, then that water tank would start to go down as I use some of that power. So the solar panels is for the daytime to fill their batteries, and I can use that power as well. So that helps me understand how much panels I need. A lot of times these days, people say, I'd like looking for a X amount inverter, X amount of battery, and maybe like 4 or 6 panels, but don't always understand how much panels they really need. So let's take a quick example. If I've got 500 watt panels, so easy, 500 watt panels, and if I've got 6 of them, 6 times 500, 3,000 watts or 3 kilowatts, and if the panels are in the sun for 5 hours a day, 3 kilowatts times 5 is 15. That means I'm going to have about 15 units of electricity per day. Yes, I know there are losses. It's never going to produce all of its power. And so I'm just using the sum as an example. So we can accurately actually size the amount of solar panels needed for your energy demand. So that's important. We can actually size the solar panels for what you need electricity for. These days, many solar installers will simply connect the amount of panels that the inverter, because it's all built in these days, will go into that inverter. And so you're limited by that. But the correct way to do it is to find out how much electricity you need to make, to fill up your batteries and to use in the daytime. And that power then gets used and decides how much solar panels we need. So solar panels and how much we need is really determined by how much power you require. There are some other factors here. Where are your panels facing? I've seen lots of solar installations along the coast going south-facing. That's a big no-no. You're not going to get a lot of efficiency and power from that. East and west is an option. Sometimes that's the only option on your roof. But what you really want is north-facing for optimal power. And you can't be flat on the roof. You need a bit of an angle. That's why you see a lot of these solar panels being bracketed up and trying to get an angle there. Ideally along the coast, and this is a bit of science, 25 to 35 degrees along here, maybe inland 15 to 25. Something like that to get the optimal angle throughout the year between winter and summer sun. And that's quite important because that's going to produce the efficiency and the power that you should be getting out of your system. So solar panels, that's an important part. The more solar panels you've got, the more power you're making to use, to store, and that's the vital part of solar. The inverter, remember, that's the peak power. That's the most amount of power that can go through. And the batteries is my storage, or the time that I'm not going to have Eskom for load shedding, that I need to make sure that I've got enough in the water tank to provide the power. So those are three key foundations for us in sizing systems. And maybe you've got a solar system at your home that someone's installed. We'll go through these three little steps and see if you've got enough power. Is it working correctly? Maybe one is out of sync with the other. Maybe you've got too much inverter and too little battery. Try and understand your system. It's going to become part of our lives more and more going forward. So I hope that was helpful. Thank you for all your questions and comments. We're going to answer some of that going forward, but take ownership of your solar installation and system that you've got. The more that you're involved and understand it, the more you're going to get out of it. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe our YouTube channel. You can find out all the links as well on Microcare Energy on our Facebook and social media pages. All right, keep the questions coming. We're going to have some guests soon. We're going to be here every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Bye for now.